All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a gripping, historical, true crime mystery. We're looking at a civilization that engineered a massive, sprawling city in a place where human beings honestly just shouldn't be able to survive. And as you'll see, we're going to uncover the completely terrifying forces that brought the whole thing crashing down. So to really set the scene here, we've got to travel back to December 1888. Picture this, two cowboys riding through this absolutely blinding Colorado snowstorm. They step right up to the edge of a sheer canyon cliff, looking for some stray cattle, when out of nowhere, they find themselves staring into a literal nightmare frozen in time. Clinging to the vertical rock face directly across the canyon was an entire sandstone city. We're talking multi-story towers and apartments wedged right into the hollow overhang of the cliff wall. And here's the really eerie part. Food was actually still stored in pottery jars. Fireplaces still held cold ash. Everyday tools were just resting on stone tables, looking as if the owners had stepped out maybe 5 minutes before. But looking around, there wasn't a single living soul in sight. Which brings us to the ultimate question, right? Why on earth did a highly advanced civilization build a city right on the precipice of death and then just vanish? When you look at these ruins, the first thing you really have to ask yourself isn't just how they lived there, but why? Why would the Ancestral Puebloans, who were this advanced society that spent centuries thriving on perfectly fertile mesa tops, why would they suddenly abandon their farms and flee down into completely inaccessible vertical cliff faces? Just to wrap your head around the sheer scale of this place, look at the numbers. 1,000. This is Cliff Palace, and it's an absolute architectural miracle containing 1,000 rooms carved straight into the canyon cliffs of Mesa Verde. At the absolute peak of their power, these people built a sprawling stone metropolis in the rock, and then, poof, vanished into thin air. To really appreciate how crazy this is, think about how exhausting it is to carry heavy groceries up like 3 flights of stairs. Okay, now imagine that, but just to even reach your apartment, you, along with men, women, and children, had to scale literally hundreds of feet of sheer vertical sandstone. And you're doing this using nothing more than shallow little hand and toe holds carved right into the rock face. One single slip, that meant falling into a 300-foot abyss. Oh, and remember, they did all of this with no iron tools, no draft animals, no wheels, nothing. Every single basket of corn, every gallon of water, every stone block, and every heavy timber log had to be hauled up or down those vertical cliffs entirely on human backs. Absolutely mind-blowing. And this perfectly illustrates their sheer engineering genius. Despite those completely lethal conditions, they built 4-story apartment complexes that actually mirrored modern urban planning. The real standouts here are the kivas. There are 23 of these subterranean circular chambers that were the center of their social and religious life, and they were brilliantly engineered. We're talking intricate subfloor ventilation shafts, deflector walls, and central hearths that flawlessly maintained stable temperatures even when it was freezing outside during brutal desert winters. Now, for decades, mainstream historians and scientists looked at this and comfortably assumed that, hey, moving into the cliffs was just a natural way to control the temperature. The old sort of cozy theory was that these rock overhangs simply offered natural shade in the blazing summer and trapped heat in the winter. Basically, they viewed it as this brilliant, ancient, climate-controlled apartment complex. But that comfortable little theory totally crumbles the second you actually look at the city from a military perspective. Because Cliff Palace wasn't a luxury apartment complex. It was a killing box, a strictly confined area engineered for total physical defense to trap and destroy an enemy force. Literally, every single architectural decision you see in those ruins was made to build an impenetrable fortress. The spatial contrast here is honestly terrifying. Let's look at how you defend this place. From above, an attack is totally blocked. Invaders standing up on the mesa top couldn't rain arrows or boulders down onto the roofs because the massive cliff overhang completely blocked their line of fire. And what about from below? Well, attacking from the canyon floor was just as suicidal. The only way up to the entrance was climbing single file up these narrow stone fissures or rickety wooden ladders set against sheer rock. Because of this setup, a tiny squad of defenders armed with just simple stones and arrows could easily hold off an invading force of hundreds. And it gets even more secure. At night, or the second they spotted trouble, the defenders simply hauled those wooden ladders right up onto the rock ledges. Instantly, all access to the city was severed. The whole complex became an isolated, floating stone island in the sky, completely immune to a direct assault. Which brings us to a massive, really looming question. What terrifying threat forced a peaceful agricultural society to turn their backs on their convenient, sunlit farmlands, retreat down into vertical canyon walls, and basically transform their entire civilization into a massive fortress network? For generations, the textbook answer was simple. The Great Drought hit between 1276 and 1299 CE, crops dried up, and people just peacefully migrated away. Nice, clean explanation, right? But modern archaeological evidence has totally shattered that myth. The new evidence points to a much darker, bloodier truth, a complete societal meltdown, and the outbreak of systemic, total warfare. So how do we actually know this? Well, it comes down to dendrochronology, which is just a fancy word for studying tree rings to figure out past climates and exact dates. This high-resolution data proved that, yeah, while the Great Drought was incredibly severe, the Ancestral Puebloans had already successfully survived way worse droughts in previous centuries. They had this massive, highly advanced network of stone reservoirs, check dams, and terraced farming fields that were specifically engineered to store water. So drought alone definitely did not destroy them. The true catalyst was what the drought actually triggered. As the water tables dropped and the farmable land vanished, the delicate peace between neighboring mesa communities totally fractured. Food supplies collapsed, panic spread like wildfire, and archaeological digs started turning up some truly chilling forensic evidence. We're talking defensive walls built across canyon entryways, burn marks on homes, arrow points deeply embedded in human remains, and unburied skeletons showing lethal blunt force trauma. Desperate, starving neighboring factions were literally fighting to the death for the very last scraps of fertile soil and water. Faced with these relentless raids and total societal breakdown, the survivors fled their open villages. They traded convenience and comfort for raw survival. They carved their homes into vertical cliffs, a desperate retreat into a place where no enemy could ever reach them without paying a lethal price. And you know, for a few decades, it actually worked. They held out in these vertical sanctuaries. But their ultimate defense quickly became their ultimate trap. Because while the thick cliff walls protected them from enemy arrows, they couldn't protect them from biological reality. Living so tightly packed together in these damp, shadowed rock alcoves created severe sanitation issues. Diseases, specifically things like tuberculosis, spread rapidly through the cramped quarters. And then the absolute nightmare scenario happened. As the drought dragged on into its second decade, the springs trickling through those sandstone alcoves dried up completely. The daily reality of this is just horrifying. To get water, women and children actually had to step out of the fortress. They had to execute this lethal water run, climbing down those sheer cliff faces, evading enemy ambushes down on the open canyon floor, and then hauling incredibly heavy pottery jars full of water all the way back up those vertical handholds. The cliff dwellings had bought them time, sure, but they had also trapped them in a slow, inescapable siege. Let's trace how this all finally collapsed. By 1295 CE, they hit the breaking point. The corn reserves were completely exhausted, and the water was simply gone. The social contract that kept these cliff villages together just disintegrated under the crushing weight of starvation, disease, and constant paranoia. There wasn't some final cinematic battle. Instead, between 1290 and 1300 CE, thousands of people gathered whatever little they could carry and began a rapid, desperate mass exodus out into the desert. They left behind their heavy, grinding stones, their pottery, and even the bones of their ancestors, leaving this entire stone metropolis totally empty and silent. Now, it's really important to note here, the Ancestral Puebloans didn't just disappear into thin air. The survivors migrated and eventually integrated into the modern Hopi, Zuni, and Rio Grande Puebloan nations. But the cliff cities themselves, they were never reoccupied. They sat there untouched for 500 years, a stark monument to civilization pushed to the absolute edge of survival. And this brilliantly illustrates a terrifying law of human history. When environmental collapse breaks a society's resource chain, neighbor inevitably turns on neighbor. Engineering gets twisted from a tool of comfort into a tool of paranoia, proving that even the most advanced fortresses become beautiful, silent tombs. But Mesa Verde isn't the only place where a civilization built a massive structural marvel to escape a collapse, only to leave behind an impossible riddle. Thousands of miles away, submerged beneath hundreds of feet of water right off the coast of Japan, lies a massive geometric stone structure. So is the Yonaguni Monument just a natural geological anomaly, or is it the lost ruins of a sunken prehistoric superpower? Well, click the next explainer on your screen right now to dive beneath the waves and uncover that incredible mystery. I'll see you over there.